I'm not concerned in my life right now with my generation ending racism. I am not. I am concerned with the children that we're bringing up who have the opportunity to take advantage of every opportunity to be exactly who they want to be. That's my focus. Because we're not going to get it right. We haven't gotten it right. I'm just being honest. We haven't gotten it right. We have systems that we cling on to and hold on to because we are not willing to try a different way.
Welcome to the Race to Social Justice, a podcast that explores the myriad racial and social challenges facing the modern world, with your hosts, Kiva White and John Kepner. Thank you for being part of the courageous conversation, because when it comes to combating social injustices in America, it is not about being confrontational. It is about being conversational.
Good evening, John.
Good evening, Kiva.
Good. Welcome, everybody, to our second edition of Courageous Conversations towards the Race to Social Justice. My name is Kiva White. I'm your co-host, and as you can see, I am the black guy. I've been this way for a very long time. John?
I'm John Kepner. I'm the white guy. And Kiva and I share a lot of interests, including the subject for tonight, racial justice, and our series. But also we share a love of the letter K. K for Kiva, K for Kepner, and K for knowledge. We have a thirst for knowledge. We're looking for knowledge out of these sessions. Kiva calls it the K factor, right, Kiva?
That's right. The K factor is very important, particularly around this topic that we're going to be discussing here in our podcast this evening. And, the goal of our podcast is really to promote social justice through honest and even sometimes difficult conversations. John and I have found our conversations to have deepened over the years, as a black guy and a white guy having these in-depth conversations around race. It really has led us to, invite other guests to share their honest experiences and learning perspectives around this issue. And so we hope these conversations will also help our listeners and even our guests on their own personal journey of discovery and knowledge acquisition as it pertains to racial injustice and social injustices in our society. So we're excited about the work that we do here on this podcast. And so, John, who do we have as our guest for today?
Well, I'm really delighted to introduce Tim Massaquoi, a very busy gentleman who I have gotten to know in one of his roles, and that's we are both on the board of an organization called Philadelphia Youth Sports Collaborative, a nonprofit that focuses on kids in Philadelphia. Tim is been very active professionally. He'll tell you about his professional background in working with kids that have experienced trauma and the role that sports plays in helping those kinds of kids. This is something we address at Philadelphia Youth Sports Collaborative. So welcome, Tim. And let me kick it off by just asking you to talk about what you are doing professionally and your previous job as well.
Well, first, let me thank you guys for having me on. Great platform, great topic, hard topic for a lot of us across our country. But it's a needed topic, and these conversations need to happen. And so, it's opening up in many forms around the country in different ways. So just want to thank you guys and say I appreciate, this platform and this conversation. So my work over the past, I'll say 12, 13 years now has been working directly with adolescents. I currently am the founding social worker at a founding high school in Camden, New Jersey, KIPP Norcross High School. This is our first year in the middle of a pandemic. We decided to start a school. So that has been a journey in and of itself. And the past 5 years, I was the director at a youth shelter, runaway homeless youth shelter, called Youth Emergency Service, servicing runaway homeless youth in Philadelphia. And through our national runaway homeless program, we service youth nationally who just happened to be I would say internationally, actually, just happened to get stuck in Philadelphia.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then in addition to that, serving on the board at the youth at PYSC, and then I also serve on a board called Youth Collaboratory, where it's a national organization that does similar work as PYSC in supporting nonprofit organizations who actually do the work. Youth Collaboratory supports those who support runaway homeless youth across our country. And then lastly, I'm a licensed therapist, so I work with individuals who seek counseling and therapy. So, just stay a little busy. That's all. A little
That's
busy.
awesome. That's awesome. We definitely appreciate your services to society to address those disparities within your local community. And it sounds like you're doing some international work on the international scene too. So that's really awesome. There's a book out by Ken Coster called Know Your Why. And he talks about the importance of knowing why we, are engaged in certain aspects of our work, and particularly as we talk about this topic here today, Tim. So I just want to go a little deeper and ask you why tell us a little bit about your personal story as it relates to racism, and why addressing this whole topic of racism is important to you.
So my why is definitely, I think I would say I have a unique perspective in my background. So I was born in New York. I was born in Brooklyn, New York. And I was raised in Newark, New Jersey back in the 90s, right? So Newark, New Jersey in the 90s is if you know about Newark, New Jersey in the 90s, it's a time of just a lot of stuff going on in the African-American community, right? And so at one point, my mom, because of my older brothers getting into some really difficult situations and circumstances in the streets, my mom decided to send me to live with my aunt, rest her soul, in Allentown, Pennsylvania. So, and we ended up moving to Whitehall, Pennsylvania, but then shortly moved into the suburbs of Allentown. And you talk about a 180 experience from, honestly, the only white people I saw in Newark were my teachers, to be one of the only Black kids in the whole school. And the only, as I recall it, and I tell this story, and I've looked it up, I was the only Black boy in my graduating class the whole time.
Wow.
Well, we had 6 or 7 Black girls, and I was the only Black boy in at my high school, in my graduating class. So we had other Black kids, including my cousins. I got to count my cousins as part of the population, but it was only me in my class. Me and maybe one other kid, but just in general, just few and far as like people who look like me in an environment where it's predominantly middle to upper class white families. And so my perspective is so unique in that I've seen 2 different aspects of society when it comes to racism. And I will be completely honest, in the conversation we can talk about it. I've had 2 major experiences with racism in Allentown. But if you look at opportunities, I had a great experience in my childhood, in my adolescence. I had great friends. Most of my friends were white. So it's a weird dynamic. And as I think deeper, I think there were levels to it. There were reasons why my experience was the way it was. Heavily, I would say there's 2 parts. I think I was a likable person, but I also I was a pretty damn good athlete. And so with being a good athlete comes certain privileges and certain things you don't deal with, and that's just a reality. I think most Black athletes who have that experience, who have excelled at some level, and even athletes in general, sometimes you don't deal with certain things other people deal with because you're held in a prestige because of your performance, what you can do. So my perspective, I say all that say, is very unique when it comes to racism, but I've had 2 very distinctive and stark experiences with racism that have stood with me every day for the rest of my life. And
I'd like to hear about them if you
absolutely
if you're comfortable.
I'm comfortable with it. So the first one was it was actually on the football field. So I played football. ran track, played basketball. The first experience I had was we're on the football field and we're playing in a team who were historically known for being racist. And so I got tackled, and it was my junior or sophomore year. I got tackled, and I was a big receiver. I was about 6'1", 6'2", 195 pounds, and it would take a lot of guys to tackle me because I was a big dude. And so finally, 3 or 4 dudes tackled me, and at the bottom of the pile, I don't know the language on you guys show, but
we want you to be as transparent. Just go for it.
You fucking nigger, you fucking monkey. Like, I'm on the bottom of the pile, and these kids are saying these things to me, and it was the first time I would say outright, explicitly, I experienced being called the N-word, and I was shook. I didn't know who did it. I was losing it. I was really upset. I told my coach, and my coach, who I love and who, again, dynamic situation, who I consider a father figure, told me, go out there and make them pay by your play, which was what I did, and I killed them. I completely destroyed this team. And at that time, I thought that was great advice because I channeled that energy into helping my team succeed. But as an adult, I know there's an opportunity missed to address an issue. And again, you're talking about the mid 90s. So these conversations, as far as people being comfortable having them now, that wasn't the case 20 something, almost 25, 30 years ago. It wasn't, right? So it wasn't the norm to have these conversations about racism. So, but as an adult, as I grew, I felt like while the first part was good, he missed the second part to advocate for me and let people know that this wasn't right. And I'm a sick 15-year-old kid, so I don't know any better at that point. Again, I got to Allentown when I would say 12, and my experience was great. I had friends, I had love, I had support, I had great teachers. And so I didn't really experience that level of racism until that first time I was on the football field.
Thanks for sharing that with us. I mean, even as you sit here and telling your story, I can hear a little bit of the re-traumatization of that experience.
Yeah,
25 years later.
Yeah, you hear the tremble in my voice because as I say it, I relive it, and for me, I've dealt with it over the years. I've come to really understand racism in our country, but you just can never get over it. You can never get over it when you experience something like that, and it sticks with you the rest of your life. Because I vividly remember the whole situation. I remember, just hearing the words, hearing being called the N-word, being called a monkey, being called everything in the book that's has been said about Black people historically, and just like the anger I felt. I was pissed. I was just really pissed off, but I didn't know who did it. So if I probably would have took somebody's head off had I known.
Well, you were also in a vulnerable position.
Absolutely. I was under a pile, and I was very much restrained. So I really couldn't if it was probably a one-off situation, I probably would have broke my hand because I would have tried to knock somebody's head off, And I think people don't really grasp how cutting to your soul it is to be called the N-word. They don't really get it. I don't think people will ever get it unless you've been called the N-word. That's the only time you get it. So.
Yeah. I think even hearing you say the N-word, even us as men of color, it's hard for us to say the word nigga.
Yeah.
Unless it's in a rap song or unless we see it in the movies, because we know it does cut to the inner parts of our being. I can relate to the first. I can remember the first time I was called that, and I remember the person adding to that saying that I was Black and I was dirty. Because I was so dark. Your skin, go wash your skin. You're so Black and you're so dirty, you nigga. And so even hearing, even like talking about it now, in my 50s, I just can I can empathize with you, and I really appreciate you being vulnerable and transparent to share that, because we abbreviate the term that people say the N word because it's, even for us, it's hard to say it.
Yeah.
There was a article, op-ed in they don't call them op-eds anymore, in the New York Times this week, written by a linguist about the word, the N word, and the history of the word. And it was very thought provoking. And part of it was about the time at which it became a word that you could not say. About 20 years ago, there was a shift, and it became one of those two words that you cannot say. I won't say what the other one is. It's a sexual term. If you guys haven't seen it, I'll send it to you. It was really interesting from a white person to read this, because we often don't go deeper than knowing that that's not a word that you say, to how it evolved. I mean, this goes way back. I mean, it was a really scholarly piece. I mean, it was, some of it I couldn't even understand. It was so, so technical. But anyway, it's funny that it's interesting that we'd be talking about it now.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
What was the second?
The second was being racial profiled in Allentown, right? As I say this, the weirder dichotomy, I guess, or of my experiences. Like, I grew up in an amazing space, but I also experienced some awful things. So I was about 16, I think 17. I graduated high school. I was on my way to Michigan, right? I was on my way to the University of Michigan. It was the summertime, right before I went to Michigan. So a friend of mine, and this is, again, and this has to do, this story to me is directly aligned to some of the work that I do today with young people making decisions. So 17, my friend, he was an older cousin. I had a gun in his house, and he said, we're going to take my cousin's gun to him because he asked him to bring it because we were going to go hang out. One of the last times I hung out with my friends. And so we put the gun in my mom's car. I had my mom's car. So we're driving down one of the main streets in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and I got pulled over. So I didn't break any laws. I didn't run any lights. I hit every stop sign. I did everything that I've learned how to do as far as a driver. So got pulled over, and a cop, asked what we're doing. We're going to our friend's house, right? So he ran our plates, right? And this is, again, you talk about chance and opportunity. My mom didn't update our not registration, get her
Insurance?
inspection. We have to do state inspections. One of the only states, right? You have to do inspections. So she didn't update her inspection. So the cop runs her place, and he says, your registration's you didn't do your state inspection. We have to search your car. That's not true. It's not true at all. It's not really the law that says if you don't have inspection or pass inspection, we have to search your car. So cop has an opportunity, searches the car. He asked us, right? A decision making. He asked us prior to, do you have any weapons or drugs that I should be concerned about? First response was to lie. No, we don't. My heart is beating 100 miles a minute. I know I'm lying to this cop. There's just this fear, right? I'm making bad decisions left and right. As a 16, 17-year-old kid, just making really bad decisions. So he searched the car. We got out the car. We didn't have to leave the car. We didn't know that. We got out the car. They didn't tell us why they pulled us over. And they found the gun. The cop pulls his gun and puts it to my forehead. And he says, "You motherfucker, you motherfucking liar." So the cop says to me, "Put your fucking hands up." So I put my hands up. My friend puts his hands up. He had another female cop come around. They slammed me against the hood, and he's just cursing at me, just cursing at me, just like he was really mad. He's apparently pissed off because he got pulled over. I mean, because we lied to him. So they take us down to the precinct, and I'm in the holding room. I'm in the holding room with my hands handcuffed behind my back, and I'm then it's a random TV, and I don't know why, but I'm like picturing ESPN coming up like literally as I'm in the jail cell, like Tim Massaquoi, local football superstar, gets arrested because I just see the whole thing on the TV. I'm looking at TV like, am I gonna flash up on ESPN? Like just a really just naive, dumb thinking at that point. So, but while I'm there, a detective walks by. He's looking at me, like staring me up and down. And he walks by and he comes back and he opens the door. He asks me, "Are you Tim Massaquoi?" And I was like, "Yeah, sir, I am." And he's like, "What are you doing here?" I was like, I don't know. That's what I told him. And so he said, "Hold on, I'll be right back." So he goes and he finds the people. And I would say 10 minutes later, he came out and they released me and they told me to walk out. So the long of it is we fit the description of two guys who were walking, who robbed an old lady. Oh. Two guys who were walking, not in a car, but two black guys who were walking and they robbed somebody. So we fit the description, so they pulled us over.
So fit the description.
The description of two
meaning
black guys.
That you were black.
That I was black, yeah.
Yeah.
No other description.
No other description. It was two black guys who robbed an old lady in Allentown, and we fit the description. But the guys were walking.
Yeah.
Driving, they robbed their own foot. So and I tell that story because my friend, he got charged with a felony possession of a weapon, and he was on his way to college. He had to drop out of college to deal with this legal thing. And it took him 5 to 6 years of his life to get back on track to go to college.
Wow.
And you talk about the opportunity, young people, the decision-making for young people.
Right.
There's a couple of things in this story that has always stuck with me. Like, had we been white, would we gotten pulled over? No, right? Because we fit the description. But even so, had we known the law, we could have responded differently. And I promise I've been in Allentown with enough kids to know that teenagers break the law all the time. And now without calling names, I've been with people who drunk drive, been high, just like risk-taking behavior all day long. And I can promise you, I've been in cars, we've rolled by officers, never got pulled over. And it's just interesting because it's just about opportunity, right? What's the opportunity or chances that you get pulled over or you get stopped because you're black? Yeah. And I recognize as an adult, had we not made that decision to bring our friends down, we would not have been in the situation, right? So that's always the argument. Well, what did you do wrong? That's always the argument when something happens, when law enforcement is involved. Well, you shouldn't have done this or you shouldn't have done that.
Right.
But my thing is, we were profiled from the gate. We were profiled. Had we not had the gun, I promise, I feel pretty much the situation would have went about the same way. You know? I truly believe that because as I remember, the cop who pulled us over, he was very intentional about searching the car. He really wanted to search our car. He was trying to do everything he could do because he had in his mind that we were doing something wrong. And we unfortunately did give him the opportunity to be justified in what he did.
Yeah.
He was wrong to pull us over, completely wrong.
And so a little bit of the flip side of that story goes back to what you said earlier about having been an athlete.
Yeah.
Gave you a certain privileges.
Give me a privilege.
Officer who saw you recognized your name because you were an athlete, and that got you out.
Yeah, recognition. So,
but if you hadn't been an athlete, if you hadn't had that,
my friend and I would have both gone through the same thing, charged with felonies. Absolutely. Yeah. And so when you talk about privilege is privilege. You know, when you talk about white privilege, it's not just about skin color. It's about prestige. It's about recognition, right? Especially locally, I would say. Maybe nationally, if you're on a larger spot, then that's a different. But when you're known locally, And Dave Chappelle talks about this in his he did a I saw him he did a sit down with David Letterman on a Netflix thing. He talked about like the fact that he's a local celebrity and there's certain things that he can do in his local town that he can't. But he also says, if I were black, if I were black, but if I wasn't a celebrity and a regular black guy, half the things I do, I wouldn't be alive. And that's privilege. That's just privilege, you know, and that's one of the things we talk about when we talk about racism and white privilege. It's just not white privilege. It's just privilege in general, to me, at least.
Well, that reminds me of a question I wanted to ask you that I've been dying to ask you. It has to do with stereotypes, right? The black professional, you were a black professional athlete, but even if you weren't, you played at the big house, the University of Michigan. And when I think of that just, you're like way up there, you know, from somebody like me who loves sports. But when I meet somebody who's black, who looks like he or she was an athlete, that's the first thing I think of. I don't think of the person, all the other things that you might think of. Now, do I think that way when I see a white person? I don't know, but I'm talking about black. And I'm wondering, and I try hard to not go there when I meet people. And I can give you a couple of examples, but I'm wondering how that is on the other side.
It is something that I've dealt with my whole life. It is something I used to wear with a badge of honor. But again, as you grow and as you get wiser, you understand that my black body had been, I would say, mystified, right? So the fact that I was a big black dude, white folks used to come up to me all the time, especially traveling. You must play football. You play football? What's your name? You must be an athlete, right? Because I think there is and I don't know, I really can't say, but I always felt that, again, I wore it like I was proud, like I was recognized. But as an adult, as somebody who is a therapist and who understands thinking and how we respond to the world, there's certain places that we put each other. As a big black guy, I have to be an athlete. If I'm not an athlete, I'm a waste of a body. Right? I'm wasting my body if I'm not an athlete. I have to be an athlete, right? Because I'm a big black guy. I look athletic, so I have to be a pro athlete, right? And so our black bodies have been mystified and just in some sense glorified, but also have been put in a box for centuries now, right? If you think about it, though, it goes back to the slave trade.
Slavery, yeah.
Slave trade, right?
Being on the stand and
just, you know, being objectified. And I had that feeling. I will tell you now that when I got drafted, and I don't know if they do it now, but the NFL did a disgusting job of that during my the scouting combine. It was just really despicable. And I don't think they do it anymore, but we would go into a room with all the coaches. We would do our, at that point, it was a body fat scan. This is 2005, 2006, and this could be controversial. I don't care. But during the combine, after you go in, it used to be an egg. We would go into the egg and the egg would measure our body fat. But then after we got out the egg, we would just be in our compression shorts, which are tights, short tights, that came up to the middle of your thigh and nothing else, no other clothing. We would go directly on the stage in a dark room with the light shining on us. The coaches could look at our bodies.
Oh, man.
Yeah. I don't know if that's a practice now, but that's the one time I felt like an object. I really did. It was a horrible experience. Everybody did it, so I was quiet about it. But I always felt that was a horrible, embarrassing situation to be in. But I wanted to go to the NFL, so I put up with it. And I didn't say anything about it, even though I felt awful about what had just happened, that experience.
Reminds me of the old
It's
Miss America contest with the
Mhm.
swimsuit. You know,
Mhm.
yeah,
I mean, it's a similar.
Yeah, they would ask
Wow.
you. Yeah, they
Wow.
would ask you to, move your arms out wide to check your wingspan. Turn to the front, turn to the side, turn to the back. Look at your muscle structure. Do a whole 180 turn, and then you say your name, and you got a number. We had
yeah, yeah,
numbers.
yeah.
You name a number, and then they say, "Thank you." Get off. Exit the stage.
It's interesting how you shared that. When you shared that, it's synonymous to. I just remember a couple of slave movies, Roots being one of them,
Yeah.
and
Roots.
Amistad,
Yeah,
being another one.
yeah,
And there are scenes in these two movies, as you were describing that, Tim. I went straight to
Me too.
those two movies
Amistad.
where,
Remember?
yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
when
when
they
they
were
were
putting the white powder all over his
white
body.
powder.
Yep.
That's right. They had
Yeah.
I mean, this may sound a little gross, but it is. We're here discussing it. When they would do the enema, like all the things to cleanse the slave, the slaves out, and just the whole violation of the body, just treating them like objects, like a commodity. So when you were sharing that, it's the image of Amistad, the movie Amistad really snapped, and I really think it's important to have these discussions about history, so and knowing history around slavery and the traumatic impact of that still felt, decades, centuries later, and going through something like that. Most people would feel honored to be, drafted into the NFL, and like many of the other brothers that black and white that was on that stage with you. I would imagine not too many of them felt violated in the manner in which you have, because of the press, like you said, the prestige and notoriety. I've been working for this all my life, and I've been trying to get to the stage, and you get to the stage, and then you're treated like an object.
You're an object, yeah. And I think, like, for black athletes, when you hear things like just shut up and dribble, and you hear all of these things, like you're getting paid all this money and things like that, that goes into feeding that stereotype of just being a commodity, an object. You're not a human being. You're getting paid this money. You should shut up and
Well, I would say a corollary to that has bothered me for years is there was, for a long time, probably still is deep in our white society, but it's that, and that's all you are.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have enough intelligence to speak out on anything, and if you do speak out, you're going to be ignored or you're going to be put down. And when John Carlos and Tommy Smith, raised their this, I'll never forget that, and it's an iconic image. But at the time, I kept thinking, oh man, that's white people are not going to like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's acting out. That's protest. They're athletes. They're not supposed to do that. Muhammad Ali. I mean, I'm going back to my time, when I was white. But Muhammad Ali, I remember, and I wrote about this summer, talked about why he changed his name. And that was very controversial. White people couldn't understand how he could change his name to Muhammad Ali. There was just like, that was, and he, that was, why would I want a slave name? That's an intelligent person talking about their situation. But I think most white people didn't see it that way.
Yeah.
And it's only been recently when black athletes have been speaking out, and my hope is a lot of people are listening now. But there's this mindset, white people, that they're just athletes. They're athletes, and that's fine, and they can be celebrated, like you were saying. But that's where it stops.
Yeah, I mean, the movie One Night in Miami, if you ever seen
that was great. Yeah,
I think that scene about Jim Brown is exactly, to this day, that is the black athlete experience.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you did is wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Support you. oh, but we can't let niggas in the house, right?
Oh yeah, that was
that was our experience. That was my experience
Mhm.
because aside from the athlete, I was feared. I've been feared because I'm a big black dude. I've always been feared, and so, and I would say to strangers, people who know me, they're not. But when you go to a different, especially if you go to a different space, when you go to a different part of the country, I played. I was with the Miami Dolphins, and we our many times in the off season I would drop. My sister lived in Atlanta, so I would drive from South Florida to Atlanta in the off season because I trained there as well at a training facility. And every time I rode, I would say Gainesville, man, and I only stopped to get gas, and that was like the hardest thing to do, to stop to get gas on a major highway that is not a rest area, but there's a gas station. It is so hard to do in the South,
Mm.
as a black person,
Mhm.
because you get people staring into your soul. And many times when I drove and I had to get gas, I would, at one time when I drove back, because I would have to go to Macomb, Georgia, in these really southern spaces, and I was like, okay, make sure I got enough gas to at least get to a rest stop, like a rest stop on the highway, on an international highway at that. But if I were to stop and pull over off that highway and go into like a local town or rural space,
Mm.
You're rolling the dice. And I don't mean to be dramatic, but it really is. That's how you feel, because you're looked at and you're stared at, and somebody wants to say something, but I'm also a big guy, so they're smart about it. So yeah, that was tough. That
Yeah.
was really tough.
Uh,
Do you,
Yeah.
do
Tim,
you,
that reminds me of a personal story.
yeah.
I graduated college in '68 and I spent the summer in California, and I drove back to time my trip back to go to the Democratic Convention in Chicago. And so I was driving through Utah, I guess I stopped one night in Reno, Nevada. And the next day I picked up a hitchhiker, a young black guy. And so where are you going? And he said, Chicago. I said, that's where I'm going. So, we went along, we camped out overnight, but we're climbing a hill, the hills of Utah. I've never been there. I don't know anything about it. We stop and we go into a place like you were talking about. And I could feel the eyes on me and him. And I'm white. I mean, I can't imagine what it would have been like for him.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's just
I think like, see, hearing those two perspectives, right? So you have the fear of being African American, and then you have the fear of being with or befriending an African American. And many of us have heard this term nigger lover. And I think that's what creates this divide and continues the perpetuation of racism, because I have a lot of white friends. And John, you're one of them. To you, that's happening. and I don't see you. And to be honest, I'm being transparent here. I don't see you as any different than any of my friends that are black. We hold the same value systems. We speak the same language when it comes to life and how we want to live, and we visit
both
the
love
same
our families.
Yeah. We visit the same places. You like Vineyard. I like the Vineyard. So I think as long as we can, and another thing that's coming out of this process here is this whole concept of storytelling.
Mhm.
By us telling our stories and sharing and having, and we dub these courageous conversations and making them intentional. This is where, in my opinion, we can begin to break down this wall of racism, because you have covert racism and then you have overt racism. And I think we're in such a covert state of society right now, where there's things that are being done. And while we're moving in a sense with this police brutality and all this killing of unarmed black men, that's starting to be more in your face, overt racism. And if it wasn't for that, the advent of technology and stuff like that, these things have been going on for years that we're seeing in the media today. But I really appreciate Tim, you sharing your story, because I think that's how me and John relationship has meshed to what it is today, to us to get on and want to do and have the same compassion to talk about these issues, because we share our stories. And I think the more vulnerable and the more transparent we can be as individuals, let's forget about race, just as people, as human beings, to share our stories, I think it will make for a better place to be in a better world. Thank you, Tim, for sharing your personal story. And I wanted to ask you, like, how can you use that, your personal experiences, in your professional work with kids? How do you? I know you mentioned one thing about decision making. I knew when I was growing up, my coach told me every decision that you make determines your destiny, and I keep that with me to this day. So share a little bit about, like, what you shared a lot about your personal experiences with racism and the decision making. So how can that help guide your work with young people?
I mean, I think when I work with young people of color, because I want to be clear about, so as a therapist, I work across the board. I work with across the board, different ethnicities, young, old, black, white, I would say almost across the board, as far as the clients I see. When I'm working with young people who live in some difficult conditions in Philadelphia and now Camden, New Jersey, I have a different approach. My approach is, and I'm a Christian, so it's spiritual. I'm planting seeds of hope in them. I'm just trying my best every time I come across a young person to make deposits of positivity and forecasting greatness in them, and just pouring. We call it pouring into, right? I'm pouring as much positive and greatness into them as I can, because I only had the experiences that I had across the board, from black, white, my family, friends, because those people poured into me. My same coach who is so funny, my same coach who didn't take the opportunity, who told me to use my anger on the field to make them pay, was the same coach who said to me when I was in high school, this is when we lost our last game of the season, he said to me, this is nothing. You're going to be playing on Sundays one day. And at that, and I got to tell you, like, I didn't ever think I didn't have a goal to playing in the NFL. I did not. I just wanted to go to college for free. And I just wanted to go to college for free. And I got to the great University of Michigan. But he told me he saw in me that you are going to be playing on Sundays one day. And I had people in my life who put those things into the universe and poured into me that manifests itself. And so when I approach and engage young people, I'm just trying to pour into them as much as possible. I'm pouring greatness, right? I'm just pouring positivity. I'm pouring expectation of success. And I'm helping them deal with their trauma. But at the same time, when I'm trying to help them take the trauma out, I'm trying to help them instill some positivity and hope into their future for success. Because my thing, honestly, and I've said this to people I work with, I'm not concerned in my life right now with my generation ending racism. I am not. I am concerned with the children that we're bringing up who have the opportunity to take advantage of every opportunity to be exactly who they want to be. That's my focus, because we're not going to get it right. We haven't gotten it right. I'm just being honest. We haven't gotten it right. We have systems that we cling on to and hold on to because we are not willing to try a different way. Some ways we are now, but you talk about the creation of this country. And John, I've said this. I think even we talked about this before when we had our discussion on PYSC.
Sure. Yeah.
This system is hard to break because this system was built with our forefathers.
Yeah.
It's going to be really hard and intentional and take generations to break the system. So my engagement, my energy is not, and there's people who do that, and like that's their journey. But my journey is really into pouring into my Black and brown kids and my white kids right? So they can have a different perspective and really be a perspective of love and looking at a person for their values and how they act as opposed to the color of their skin.
Wow.
That's my perspective. And I don't feel ashamed about it. I that's just the way I move. So that's why I work with young people. Again, I work with young people of all colors, of all different backgrounds as much as possible. And that's my goal, because if we can instill something in them, then that's when it'll shift.
Yeah.
It'll shift.
Now,
That's
you
good.
talked about hope, but I remember you alluded to that other conference where we were all listening and talking. You said something that really hit me, and I wonder if you remember it. The question was, how are the kids that you're working with? How do they view white people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
Speak to that.
they don't care about white people like that. Like and I don't mean to say it in a disrespectful way, but their issues and the conditions of their situations won't allow them to worry about racism. They're too focused on other things that are immediate, right? So they understand racism is there. When I work with kids, they understand racism is there. They understand bigotry is there. They understand all the isms are there. But their situations are some of them are very dire. Like, you know, you worked in the homeless system, the runaway, the shelter system. We don't have time we gotta figure out where we're gonna stay. Now at the shelter, these kids, there's their anger because they're experiencing trauma. Their trauma is more important than racism. It really is.
I would even add, I was reading, and John, I would love to see that article on that you were talking about earlier, about the word nigger and how that's being articulated. I also received an article from the New York Times and was talking about this very subject we're talking about now, about the plight of young Black America. And the writer coined this phrase that young Black men, just like you said, Tim, don't have time to really delve into deep dive into what racism is and trying to dissect that, because they have to be quote unquote, they're too busy being quote unquote on point. And it's this concept of on point in the streets, and being on point in the streets means you're watching your back. Exactly. You're watching your back. And you're on point to make sure that at the end of the day, if you see danger coming, you can spot it a mile a minute. And it's really like this internal instinct that young people. I grew up in New York too, Brooklyn, and so Tim, I think you understand when we talk about the code of the streets. There's a certain code of the streets you have as a young person. You know where to go, where not to go, and so they're talking about this concept of being on point and how that within itself causes a lot of stress. To walk down the street particularly now as a young Black person with all that's happening in society, of cop car pass, how do you stay on point so that you can make sure that you get home safely? So I think, when you say, white, young kids don't really have time to really, build relationships with white people, I think that's very realistic. And it's also, a sad reality of where their focus is on a daily basis, and not trying to be, re-traumatized, so to speak. They're trying to protect themselves from that every single day. It's a tough situation.
That like in Philly now, our kids are dying at a clip that is unprecedented. Our kids are dying, and it's sad to say it's not directly by. Not sad to say, but it's not directly by racism. Our kids are dying. Our kids aren't dying from racism right now in Philadelphia. Our kids are dying because of each other, because of decisions, because of trauma. So racism, I would say, in our city, it's not the biggest thing we're dealing with right now in Philadelphia. Our kids are dying very, very, very horrible deaths. In the 16, 15, 14, like our kids are dying really, really futures are being stripped away. And so when you talk about focus and having a survival in the streets in your community, it's not racism that are killing our kids. It's circumstances, it's each other. Let's be transparent, let's be honest. It's each other. It's trauma, it's stress, it's anger, it's just hopelessness. Those things are what's killing our kids. And so when you talk about dealing with young people and their trauma, it's not about racism for our kids. I can't say that across the country, but in Philadelphia, it's not about racism. It's about a bad system. It's about an oppressive system, but within the oppressive system directly, it's really not about racism.
Yeah.
Wow. This is going so fast. We're about 5 minutes from stop, and we promised to let you go for your. I have about 50 more questions that have touched on.
We may have to do a part 2 on this one.
I'm cool with that.
Spirituality, we could go down that avenue.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I think the three of us share something in common. I believe you were both raised without a dad in the house.
Mm-hmm.
My dad died when I was very young. The impact of other people on our lives. You mentioned your coach.
Mm-hmm.
You could talk about the impact of mentors, and there are a lot of other things. Is there something though that this discussion has generated that you'd like to conclude with, Tim? Anything that comes to mind, or something that we should have asked that we didn't?
No, Kiva. John, I think what Kiva alluded to earlier is, I would say, more so. I think it's really one of the things that's really going to help us turn this tide of racism in our country. It's looking at each other's characteristics, like really embracing Martin Luther King's words, like looking at our personalities, how we treat each other, and seeing each other as valuable. Seeing, my pastor talks about seeing a human being as valuable and precious. Like precious and valuable, like we're all are precious and valuable. And if we can really start to adjust our lens and see each other as precious and valuable, our perspective will change. And I'll also say, Kiva, I know you do diversity, equity, inclusion work.
Yes.
And I know there are a lot of that is popping up. It is and people of color are starting to be recognized and being put in a position of authority. And it's great. But I also, for my listener, the listeners who are white who are listening to this, I would really say the homework for those listeners is to really, when you're home and when with your family, that's the work. That is the work.
Yeah.
Conversations we have, the theories, when you see stuff happen on the news, how you respond, the thoughts that come up, that's the work that's going to change and hopefully end racism one day.
Wow. It's so interesting you say that, because Toni Morrison, in the book White Fragility, there's a quote about Toni Morrison's work, and she talks about this concept called race talk, because we all do it. And exactly, and basically what she's drilling down to is we have to watch the conversations that we have, because sometimes they may not be intentional in terms of bringing about harm. If you're around your friends, if you're a white family and you're around your friends and you're having these conversations that they're grading and nobody's checking you on that, it becomes normalized as a part of the race talk process. And the same thing with us. Like when we, when people of color, and I get with my boys, I'm always consciously aware not to, say anything derogatory or always to respect.
I'm doing
people.
that work too. I'm trying to change my language. I'm trying to change my thinking around my friends, my go-to automatics. I'm trying to change it. And,
that's good. That's the work. That's the work. That's the work. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think the trainings we can go. I teach this stuff at Rutgers. I train on it, or if not weekly, and at the same time, the real work is right here. It's with me, and so I like how you encourage all of us, not just white families, but everybody.
Yeah.
Particularly now when you see, I gotta teach my girls. My girls are biracial now. How do I teach them? How to view police officers? How do I share with them about what's going on in society? Because we have to educate them on the realities of things that could potentially impact their lives. So a lot of the work does start within the household. So
yeah,
appreciate you raising that issue.
I think that those concluding remarks, Tim, also bring together some other things that you said and we talked about, and the word hope sticks with me. And one of my hopes is that this awakening starting last summer across the country will continue, be reinforced, but more and more people doing what you're saying and multiplying that at the grassroots level will have an impact.
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, the systemic changes are going to be years to make. And demographics may help take care of it, but who knows? But if we can just one person at a time make a difference in terms of racial justice, it will have an impact over time.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway,
Awesome.
well, thank you very much for joining us. And you want to wrap it up, Kiva?
Yeah, sure. Just want to thank everybody for joining us again for another courageous conversation here for the Race to Social Justice. And remember, when you're engaged in these type of discussions on racism, it's not about being confrontational. It's all about being conversational. We appreciate you all for listeing.
And one final concluding right. While we've been talking black and white, go blue.
Oh, blue.
All right.
Awesome.
Thanks
Tim,
for joining us.
all
Tim.
the best. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for
Bye-bye.
having me, guys. Have a good
All
rest.
right. Yeah,
Bye.
take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.